Good evening, everyone. Why is it not switching? This is not a good sign when we have to do an interview. Oh, I know why. Because I don't have all the technology on. Webcam should not come with software. I've been saying it. I've been saying it. I've been saying it. It's so annoying. My softwares have softwares. It's so annoying. Ugh. Anyway. Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. Welcome to the Cameron Journal Newshour. It is going to be short on headlines this evening because in a half hour, we are going to be joined by Bruce Koerber. He is best known for his book Divine Economics, and we're going to talk about how the economy is not in line with divine, religious, biblical theories. He's from the Baha'i religion, among other things, and so we're going to get into economics and his view of the economy and what's wrong and how things are out of alignment. I will admit, I haven't looked into his theories and things too much, so we're going to learn together. But he is a friend to the Soup Podcast Network, of which I'm a part. And it's going to be a really exciting thing, an opportunity. We've been meaning to kind of have him on the show a little bit more and all this sort of thing. And so it'll be really exciting to learn more from him and figure out, kind of what this all means and what it could mean for us economically and what his theories are. And it's just going to be different. It's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting. Also, he'll be calling in a little bit. So we're going to do about 20-25 minutes of news and headlines, and then we're going to get into that. I also want to mention to make sure to go subscribe to the newsletter at CameronJournal.com/newsletter. You can also subscribe at CameronJournal.substack.com, which if you're already on Substack is probably easier. I've sort of moved the newsletter over to Substack, but you can still sign up at the website. We'll move you over for you. And I also want to thank all of our Cameron Journal Plus subscribers, and I want to thank everybody who is subscribed to Cameron Journal Plus, and make sure to subscribe to Cameron Journal Plus if you want to support my work and my journalism. That is fantastic. Also, my coffee link is in the newsletter, so if you sign up for the newsletter, I sign up for a monthly thing. I get it. Because, 2 new memberships right now, all this type of thing. But you can tip me on coffee if you want to, which is really, really, really great and a lot of fun. Fun because you support journalism, and fun for me because I get coffee. So everybody wins. So it's a really fun. On social media, you can find me at Cameron Cowan on Instagram, LinkedIn, at Cameron Journal on TikTok. So, which is great. Lots of clips of this type of thing. I haven't done any original content for TikTok, which I used to do a lot of, and I need to get back into doing a short video every day sort of thing in addition to the show, but there's lots of clips. I want to remind everyone, on Wednesdays, come see my second show, The Living Joke. You can subscribe to those updates at thelivingjoke.substack.com, which is really, really awesome. So that's a lot of fun. So let's dive right into the headlines now. And we have all sorts of interesting... Oh, I did not want to do that. Hang on. I was trying to add in quickly. I wanted to do an ad break before we have Bruce Koerber on, and I was trying to add this video real quick, and instead it switched the scene, which it always does.
Millennials are America's largest, most...
And there it is, but that's not what I want to do. Oh, I didn't want to do that either. Oh well. Hang on. Hold that thought. There we go. I will figure that out in a little bit. Anyway, instead, what we're going to do is we're going to dive, excuse me, right into the headlines. And this is going to be a lot of fun because we have a sort of an interesting set of news stories this week. I was on the newsletter on Saturday. I had reported how some fractures were starting to open up within, sort of within the MAGA movement over economics, over immigration, and interestingly, last week, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who has been on a lot of shows talking about affordability and all this sort of thing, for everyday Americans and things like that. She is went on to do all this type of thing. She announced that she is going to resign her House seat in January of 2026 before the midterms, which I think is very funny. Trump had withdrawn her endorsement of her, and she kind of made that irrelevant by being like, not only am I not going to run again, I'm not even staying this whole time. Y'all gonna send somebody else. I am going home, and all this sort of thing. And that's been kind of a big bit of news. I did find out from reading David Pakman's newsletter just before the show. Trump quietly has shut down the Department of Government Efficiency, and he says that after it failed to deliver on promised reductions in waste, fraud, and bureaucracy, heavily promoted with Elon Musk, DOGE never produced measurable results. Many of its employees were reassigned or lost their jobs. What was meant to be a hallmark achievement of his administration instead become a public embarrassment, which is definitely one way of putting it. I did kind of have to go investigate this, and I found a Reuters story. Here, let me turn on the video so we can read together. And it says here that this is from yesterday. U.S. President Donald Trump's Department of Government Efficiency has disbanded with 8 months left to its mandate, ending an initiative launched with fanfare as a symbol of Trump's pledge to slash the government size, but which critics say delivered few measurable savings. That doesn't exist, Office of Personnel Management Director Scott Cooper told writers earlier this month when asked about DOGE's status. It says here, quote, "It is no longer a centralized entity," Cooper added, in the first public comments from Trump administration at the end of DOGE. The agency, set up in January, made dramatic forays across Washington in the early months of Trump's second term to rapidly shrink federal agencies, cut their budgets, or redirect their work to Trump's priorities. The OPM, the federal government's Human Resources Office, has since taken over many of DOGE's functions, according to Cooper and documents reviewed by Reuters. At least 2 prominent DOGE employees are now involved with the National Design Studio, a new body created through an executive order signed by Trump in August. That body is headed by Joe Gebbia, co-founder of Airbnb, and Trump's order directed him to beautify government websites. Gebbia was part of billionaire Elon Musk's DOGE team, while DOGE employee Edward Corriston, nicknamed Big Balls, encouraged followers on his X account to apply to join. The fading away of DOGE is in sharp contrast to the government-wide effort over months to draw attention to it, with Trump, his advisors, and cabinet secretaries posting about it on social media. Musk, who led DOGE initially, regularly touted his work on his X platform, and at one point brandished a chainsaw to advertise his efforts to cut government jobs. "This is the chainsaw for bureaucracy," Musk said, holding the tool above his head at the Conservative Political Action Conference in National Harbor, Maryland in February. DOGE claimed to have slashed tens of billions of dollars in expenditures, but it was impossible for outside financial experts to verify that because the unit did not provide detailed public accounting of its work. President Trump was given a clear mandate to reduce waste, fraud, and abuse across the federal government, and he continues to actively deliver on that commitment, said White House spokeswoman Liz Huston in an email to Reuters. Trump administration officials have not openly said that DOGE no longer exists, even after Musk's public feud with Trump in May. Musk has since left Washington. Trump and his team, nevertheless, have signaled its demise in public since this summer, even though the U.S. president signed an executive order earlier in his term decreeing that DOGE would last through July of 2026. In statements to reporters, Trump often talks about DOGE in the past tense. Acting DOGE Administrator Amy Gleason, whose background is in healthcare tech, formally became an advisor to the Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy in March, according to a court filing. In addition to her role with DOGE, her public statements have largely focused on her HHS role. Republican-led states, including Idaho and Florida, meanwhile, are creating local entities similar to DOGE. A government-wide hiring freeze, another hallmark of DOGE, is also over, Koerber said. Trump, on his first day in office, barred federal agencies from bringing in new employees, with exceptions for positions that his team deemed necessary to enforce immigration laws and protect public safety. He later said DOGE representatives must approve any other exceptions, adding the agency should hire no more than one employee for every four that depart. There's no target around reductions anymore, Koerber said. DOGE staff have also taken on other roles in the administration. Most prominent is Gebbia, whom Trump tasked with improving the visual presentation of government websites. So far, his design studio has launched websites to recruit law enforcement officers to patrol Washington, D.C., and advertise the president's drug pricing program. Gebbia declined an interview with Reuters via spokesperson. Zachary Terrell, part of the DOGE team given access to government health systems in the early days of Trump's second term, is now Chief Technology Officer at the Department of Health and Human Services. Rachel Riley, who had the same access according to court filings, is now Chief of the Office of Naval Research, according to the office's website. Jeremy Lewin, who helped Musk and the Trump administration dismantle the U.S. Agency for International Development, now oversees foreign assistance at the State Department, according to the agency's website. Musk, shortly after Trump's election, said he had a mandate to delete the mountain of government regulations. He made undoing government regulations and remaking the government with AI two key tenets of DOGE, in addition to eliminating federal government jobs. The administration is still working towards slashing regulations. The White House Budget Office has tasked Scott Langmack, who is DOGE's representative at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, with creating custom AI applications to pour through U.S. regulations to determine which ones to eliminate, according to his LinkedIn profile. Musk, meanwhile, has reappeared in Washington. This week he attended a White House dinner for Saudi Arabian Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. So, I mean, I always found it very interesting when we stopped hearing about DOGE, which really kind of when Musk left, that was kind of the end of that era. And the fact that it's kind of been parted out and moved around and isn't really a centralized thing anymore and all this type of thing is quite interesting. Several months ago now, I covered a story talking from one ex-employee who said, actually, we found there wasn't a lot of fraud and waste involved. Like there wasn't really a lot to cut, and government actually works pretty well. You'd be surprised. And I thought that was that was rather interesting, but it is quite obvious that we have moved on, and people have taken other new and different roles within the administration. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing Pacman mentioned in his newsletter was his sort of truth social meltdown, and also the Trump's difficulty walking and concerns with his health. And it says here, a concerning video of Trump struggling to walk outside the White House has led clinical psychologist Dr. John Gartner to warn of severe cognitive decline. Gartner cites unstable gait, memory gaps, disoriented speech, phonemic paraphrasis, tangential sentences, and diminishing vocabulary. He predicts Trump may not remain mentally competent by the end of his term. Well, people have been saying that for a while. There's also been, it was funny because I just saw this tweet from the Department of Defense, that they're investigating Senator Mark Kelly for violating the Military Code of Justice due to his comments, along with many other Democrats, about warning soldiers to not follow unlawful orders and to follow the Constitution. The Trump that did kind of cause a bit of the meltdown with Trump, which I thought was rather interesting, and that was, an odd dynamic, with that video coming out and then Trump literally being like they should be arrested, they should be in jail, they should be this, that, and the third. It's weird. I get kind of where he's, it's the reaction you would expect. Okay, it is, but it might be a little over the top, I guess we'll say. And I'm gonna see, yes, here's the official statement. I just saw this on Twitter. Here it is. And it says here, the Department of War has received serious allegations of misconduct against Captain Mark Kelly, United States Navy retired, in accordance with the Uniform Code of Military Justice, with the code and other applicable regulations. A thorough review of these allegations has been initiated to determine further actions, which may include recall to active duty for court-martial proceedings or administrative measures. This matter will be handled in compliance with military law, ensuring due process and impartiality. Further official comments will be limited to preserve the integrity of the proceedings. The Department of War reminds all individuals that military retirees remain subject to the UCMJ for applicable offenses in federal laws such as such a code. Prohibit actions intended to interfere with loyalty, morale, or good order and discipline of the armed forces. Any violations will be addressed through appropriate legal channels. All service members are reminded that they have a legal obligation under UCMJ to obey lawful orders, and that orders are presumed to be lawful. And orders that are presumed to be lawful. A service member's personal philosophy does not justify or excuse the disobedience of an otherwise lawful order. And that that is all over a video that Democrats posted reminding military members that they have an obligation to not follow unlawful orders. So that's fun. I'm gonna see if I can find that video real quick. Because it's worth. Trump had called it seditious. I think here it is from CBS in Pittsburgh. Here it is.
Veterans to urge current officials to disobey illegal orders. Michigan Senator Alyssa Slotkin, a former CIA analyst, posted the video. The lawmakers say threats to the Constitution aren't just coming from abroad.
No one has to carry out orders that violate the law or our Constitution.
We know this is hard and that it's a difficult time to be a public servant.
But whether you're serving in the CIA,
the Army,
or Navy,
the Air Force,
your vigilance is critical.
And know that we have your back.
Because now, more than ever,
the American people need you. We need you to stand up for our laws,
our Constitution, and who we are as Americans. Don't give up.
Slotkin told the New York Times that she's heard from active duty troops who are concerned about the legality of strikes on people the Trump administration says are drug traffickers. The administration called the video an attempt to encourage the military to rebel against Trump.
Yes, indeed. And that that is also caused part of the Truth Social meltdown over the weekend. I have not been in the military. I come from a military family, but not been in the military. If I'd been a little bit more prepared, I would have texted my dad to find out what he thinks about all this, and maybe I will, and I'll report back next week. Or maybe catch me up on social media sort of thing, which I've not been terribly active on in non sort of stock content sort of thing. I need to get better about that. I tend to read more than I contribute, and that's not good when you're a content creator. My job is to make stuff so that you all will watch it and read it. Before our guest comes in a few moments, I want to shift over to the G-20 meeting. Now, the G-20 usually includes the top 20 economies, and the U.S. decided to boycott over South Africa persecuting the white farmers, if you remember that whole thing. And they, are kind of like, okay, we're going to move on without you. So the headline, can the world move on without the U.S.? G-20 leaders gave it a shot. It says President Cyril Ramaphosa of South Africa could not contain his laughter. A reporter asked him to confirm reports that the United States had dropped its boycott and asked to participate in the Group of 20 summit in Johannesburg, just 2 days before it was set to start. The South African leader barely uttered a word before breaking down laughter, eventually composing himself and saying he had received a note from the Americans, quote, about a change of mind, unquote. President Trump's spokeswoman, Carolyn Leavitt, later said that Mr. Ramaphosa's language was, quote, not appreciated by the president or his team, unquote. Just a few weeks ago, that sort of scolding from the White House would have set off a slight panic in the South African government, and perhaps drawn an explanation from Mr. Ramaphosa for his departure from diplomatic decorum. But with Mr. Trump boycotting the annual meeting over his contention that South Africa is persecuting its white minority, some countries were taking a tougher tone on the world's largest economy and trying to show that life can go on. That meant shaking hands, signing deals, deepening alliances, and making pledges at slickly produced live events. The G20 should send a clear message that the world can move on with or without the U.S., Ronald Lamolle, South Africa's foreign minister, said at a forum hosted by Bloomberg before the summit. We will mark them absent and continue with the business. South Africa declined a Trump administration request that Mr. Ramaphosa ceremonially hand over the summit to the acting ambassador for the United States, which hosts next year's G20. Mr. Ramaphosa would not hand over to a junior diplomat, the government said, adding that American officials could instead come by its foreign ministry later in the week for the handover. At the summit, Mr. Ramaphosa pushed ahead with an agenda that put African interests at the fore. He broke with tradition by starting the two-day meeting with the adoption of a final declaration. Such documents are normally issued at the end, and he said that the declaration had a unanimous agreement among the members present, despite an objection from the foreign minister of Argentina. That country, several participants said, has championed the Trump administration's interest this year. We note with deep respect the views expressed by Argentina, Mr. Ramaphosa responded. We will, with great respect, move ahead with the accepted declaration as the G20. The final declaration included many terms that Trump officials had opposed in meetings ahead of the summit, among them just energy transitions, climate change, and gender equality. Quote, I think the big message coming out of the G20 is that despite the geopolitical bullying that exists, despite the power of the U.S., that countries can come together and still get stuff done, said Nabil Ahmed, a senior director at Oxfam America, who attended the summit. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva of Brazil told reporters after the meeting ended on Sunday that although Mr. Trump has been promoting unilateralism, quote, I think multilateralism will win. Everyone here knows that together we'll be much stronger, much more competent. But for all the celebration, Mr. Lula and his fellow leaders are under no illusion that they can simply thumb their noses at Mr. Trump. The size of its economy means the United States still has great influence over geocritical global issues like renewable energy, trade, and wars. Brazil is still grappling with the high tariffs Washington imposed on some of its products. South Africa is in the middle of a difficult negotiations with the Trump administration to try to get its own 30% tariff reduced. And the final G20 declaration is not binding. It makes a series of recommendations, and while it can influence policy decisions of institutions like the International Monetary Fund, the U.S. vote has serious influence at many of these institutions. Mr. Trump's impact could be felt on the summit's first day when Ukrainian allies quickly had to pull together a meeting on the sidelines to discuss a contentious American-backed peace plan for war with Russia. That was just one of the geopolitical issues that divided G20 leaders. Quote, we are having trouble putting new compromises on the table, unquote, President Emmanuel Macron of France said, adding that G20 negotiators found themselves struggling to come to terms, quote, on subjects we thought were settled, unquote. But in some ways, America's retreat has allowed other nations to look past their problems with each other. It wasn't long ago that the European Union and South Africa were at odds over South Africa's friendliness with Russia after its invasion of Ukraine. But in the days leading up to the G20 summit, Mr. Ramaphosa was all smiles as he stood alongside Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, and Antonio Costa, President of the European Council, during events. The European leaders announced that a new minerals pact with South Africa and pledged billions of dollars towards renewable energy development in Africa. Quote, we are a partner that plays by the rules, Ms. von der Leyen said. We listen to our partners. Oh, the subtweet. Oh, the subtweet. The subtweet. I talked about this on the newsletter as well. It's a very, this ultimately doesn't necessarily mean that much, but it is interesting how Trump resetting American foreign policy is causing other pieces on the table to move around. And this idea of the rest of the world trying to hold on to multilateralism, even as the U.S. abandons it, I think remains interesting for a whole kind of wide variety of reasons. And I think this idea that the world's trying to learn to live without the U.S. and just kind of mark them absent and move on with business and all this type of thing is interesting. But it's also kind of funny how Macron is complaining about there already being fractures and there's still the Ukraine thing to deal with. And it's kind of like, you know, I think there's a moral of the story here. Life isn't so easy without the U.S. Life is not so easy when it's just kind of up to you all to put aside your differences and get along and figure things out when no one's sort of dominantly setting the agenda in a big economic way. Interestingly enough, what's kind of missing from this article is China. I said in the newsletter, the reality of this is that the U.S. taking a step back, and we kind of already saw this um, with with the Obama years when it was kind of, oh, let's take a step back and stop being the world's policeman and all this sort of thing. Um, is that other people rush in to fill the power vacuum. And ultimately, this is a golden opportunity for China to fill in some of that international role that the U.S. used to do. Now, I think what's interesting is Beijing is not necessarily too hot to trot on becoming the world's policeman or getting too involved, but economically speaking, they're definitely interested in filling in some of those economic gaps of what we used to do. I think it will be interesting post Trump to see if there's any movement towards returning to multilateralism and getting more involved in these institutions and trying to get back and whether people will take the US back or if the rules will have changed so much by that time that it may not be so easy and we may be viewed with an air of suspicion. The reminder being that these things have consequences. These decisions have consequences, and Trump is very used to kind of, jerking people around, and people in other countries don't necessarily have to always put up with that. So, our guest Bruce Koerber is going to be here in 2 minutes, so I'm going to play a little ad for my book, America's Lost Generation, and hopefully by the time that's done airing, Mr. Koerber will be here, if I've got my timing correct. We'll see. So, we'll be back after these messages. Or not. Well, damn, I went through all of that to try to... Maybe not. Try as I might. I was hoping...
Millennials are America's largest, most educated generation in American history. A generation of ambition, education, and progress facing an uncertain reality. Born into an era of economic chaos, they face challenges far beyond what they were told to prepare for. They've had to rethink traditional milestones as they enter adulthood during global uncertainty. Their struggles mirror those of a generation before them, Japan's lost generation. The same story, different country, different time. America's lost generation goes... Millennials are America's largest as they enter adulthood during global uncertainty. Their struggles mirror those of a generation before them, Japan's lost generation. The same story, different country, different time. America's lost generation goes beyond the numbers to capture the unique ways this generation is reshaping their future, in their own words. It's a story of real people, authentic challenges, and untold resilience. Explore the stories and reflections of America's Lost Generation by Cameron Cohen. Available now at soupllc.com.
Okay, I almost had that figured out. I had to start a new scene, and it blipped in the middle, but that's okay. On the bright side, my timing was perfect, and Bruce is here to talk. So let me add him in. Let me do that, and let me do that, and let me do that. And welcome, Bruce, to the Cameron Journal Newshour. Your timing was perfect. I finished the headlines. I was running an ad, and I'm like, if I time this correctly, he'll be here when the ad ends, and here you are. So this almost looks like a professional production. It's kind of fun. But yeah, so I've already kind of told people a little bit, but this evening, I'm very interested in finding out a little bit more about you and your background and divine economics. So rather than me trying to do a whole intro like we do on the podcast, why don't we just start right into the conversation? Why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your work?
Okay, well, I was studying international forestry at Auburn University, and I met a professor who was looking for a graduate student in agricultural economics, and so I had to get some catch up on economics. So they sent me to the economics department, which was at Auburn University, which was had about 3 years prior to that become the world center of Austrian economics.
Mm.
Uh, the Mises Institute established itself there. So fortunately for me, even though there were different professors of different slants there, the professor that I had was an Austrian economist, and he introduced me to Austrian economics. So that kind of changed my perspective on the world, and I've been an Austrian economist ever since. So that was in 1985, 84, 85.
Well, that was very popular at the time, certainly. So that makes sense that it fits. So, well, that's excellent. So that's the. I have my. We could have a whole conversation on Austrian economics. That we could do a whole show just on that because I
Yay.
have thoughts, but many thoughts. But this evening I wanted to let's get into the divine economics. So you were started as an
Okay.
Austrian economist, all this everything. When did you? Because you've written like 4 books. So when did you get into kind of realizing the economy is, as you put it over email when I was hurriedly on Saturday night saying, "Can we do this on Monday?" You were saying like the economy sort of out of ordered. How did we make the leap from Austrian economics to divine economics?
Well, there's a little bit of my perspective coming into Austrian economics. I was a Baha'i, and I also kind of recognized the equality of science and religion. So I never uh, removed the idea that religion had a play something to contribute to the
Mm.
science. And so when I would read Austrian economics or religious teachings or whatever, I would see basically the interconnectedness of them. So a lot of people who are Austrian economists, a person could be an Austrian economist. In fact, some of the most famous of them are what they would consider themselves atheists. I'm
Mm.
not an atheist, but I'm an Austrian economist, and so I was able to, from that perspective, enrich the Austrian tradition. And so, what really enriched the Austrian tradition was the discovery of and the development of the divine economy theory, and that all started in the late 2004. I had a dream. I'm just telling you, I don't usually put pieces of paper and pencil beside my bed and a bedstand. For some reason, intuition reasons, I had a pencil and paper next to my bed during this period.
Mm.
It woke me up what I dreamed, and but I don't ever remember my dreams. So, and I was conscious enough to know that I don't remember my dreams. So I just wrote down what I saw in my dream, and I went back to sleep. Then when I woke up in the morning and I looked at it, there was an image on the page on that piece of paper that basically had the divine economy in the center, and then it had human spirit, transformation, law, and order. That's what the image was. It was like a flower with the center of the blossom and then 4 petals. And because I'm an Austrian economist and because I'm a Baha'i, but mostly because I'm technically trained as an Austrian economist, I was able to unfold that image first into a macroeconomic model, then into a microeconomic model, then into an ethical economics model, and then into an economic justice model. So that's why it's that expansive and that comprehensive. But it's all within the tradition of what's called classical liberalism, which
Mm.
means that recognizing that human beings are unique, each human being is unique, and then the contribution of Austrian economics is that they make their choices subjectively, they value things subjectively, and then there's other elements to it too, but that's where it all began.
No, that's very helpful. And for those that are uninitiated, including somewhat myself, can you give us a quick and dirty on what the Baha'i religion is? It's a very small Abrahamic religion. And ironically, I work for a Baha'i and know almost nothing about it, even though we have 17 books in our library. And there's a new bestseller campaign going out on Friday that I've approved, sort of thing. I don't actually know that much. I know the listeners don't very much either. Can you give us a quick and dirty on the Baha'i religion?
Well, Baha'is believe that there's one God, and all the religions believe in the same God, and that the humans evolve spiritually, just like they've evolved physically. And part of their spiritual evolution is they. So here's the thing: humans can only comprehend up to a certain level, and then after that, they can't go beyond that point unless there's guidance. So God basically helps humans spiritually evolve by sending messengers of God. That's what advances human civilization. These messengers of God come, they teach humanity what they need to know for that age, and then in the future, the next age, when that time comes, a new messenger will come. And so Baha'is believe that Baha'u'llah, who lived in the last century in the 1800s, passed in 1892, that he is the latest, most recent messenger of God.
Excellent. No, thank you very much for people that are, because it's a very small religion, so a lot of people have, if they've heard of it, they don't know anything about it, and so I had literally heard of it in passing before I met Wade Franson and started working at Suit Media and all this sort of thing, and so I've learned bits and pieces more, but that's an excellent explanation. Thank you. So then let's dive into the ultimate comparison I wanted to make, which is what is wrong with today's economy and how would bringing it into alignment with these values that you have articulated, what would that look like? So let's start with kind of what's wrong and then how do we fix it?
Well, what's wrong is economics uses the wrong scientific method. So I'm speaking from the point of view of the classical liberal or an Austrian economist. Most economists, and the economy is run by these people who are economists or politically involved, using intervention to design what they want to design. But the method that the economics uses outside of the Austrian school is an incorrect methodology. And so as a result, it basically what happens is they're able to they impose vain imaginings, which the correct the economic term for their vain imaginings that they impose on humanity is economic intervention. Because here's the thing: there's over 5 billion adults in the world, and every one of them is making their own subjective valuations, and then those they make choices based on that, and their choices change all the time spontaneously. They can change their mind even. So there's no way a human mind can comprehend what's going on in the market process. Okay.
Well, that's the gas pump problem. My dad always talks about, like, economists presume that if there's a cheaper gas price somewhere, people will automatically go there. But that's almost never true because they never seem to understand how people work. And I said, yeah, I'm like, I get that. I said, because the first problem is you may spend more gas going to get the cheaper gas and you've come out a loser. And I said, two, and here's the thing I think economists forget, people are lazy. And I was working somewhere at the time, and I said, I go for the cheapest gas on my route to work. I had a long commute at the time. I'm like, I go for the cheapest gas pump on my route to work. That's the gas market I care about in North Seattle. I was living in Seattle at the time. In North Seattle. Between Northgate and Ballard, where I work, what's cheap on that road? That's my gas market. Forget everything else. That's my gas market. And so, because they, well, but if you drove over here, it would be cheaper. Yeah, I have to get to work, bro. Like, I work at 7:30. Like, so yeah, but the economic models never account for that. That's how people are doing it. So that completely that's vain imaginings right there.
Right, right. And so basically, what happens is the economic science is full of itself. It imagines that it has this power and its purpose, and it basically is rotten to the core because it's trying to control people. That's what it's trying to do. It's using an incorrect scientific methodology, and it aspires to control people, and so it and because it's using this incorrect methodology, basically, it doesn't really understand the human reality, and it distrusts human capacity and its ability to transform. And so, and the here's where it gets where the divine economy comes in. Not only is it incorrect scientifically with regards to the human reality, uh, it's far from trusting in God. In fact, it's like the the standing belief in the economic science is that uh, um, looking um,
The standing belief in economic science.
yeah is regarding is having neutrality,
Yeah.
uh, and that it's good science not to recognize the power and purpose of God. Okay, so that it's completely removed from the science, but that's where the disconnection is, because uh, the thing is, like I was saying, because humans are subjective, they're making their values, they're making choices based on their subjective values, and that subjectivity basically is another way of saying that each individual is unique, and so uh, if you don't take allow so and because of that, uh, it's incomprehensible to understand what all is happening in the world instantaneously and in the future. The
Yeah.
only possible way that can function is recognizing that there's something that is all knowing and providential, and that's basically what the economy really in its true essence is. It's providential. And so if there's a lack of trust in God and an attempt to make science neutral about God being the force behind it all, then uh, the outcome is we have to do it, we have to fix it, rather than letting it work as it should work, as it would work without that intervention.
Understandable. I think there's I, I mean, I think there's a couple problems there. I think it's interesting when you talk about the scientific neutrality and kind of pulling God out of the equation. There were many Enlightenment scientists that if attributed things to God they did not yet understand, and if anything, technology has reduced that as the decades and centuries have gone by since then. But I think it's, when we look at, our present system, which is horrifically unequal and is filled with wealth concentrated at the top and wealth inequality, which amplifies human suffering to absolutely inhumane levels and all this sort of thing. Um, I'm not quite sure how a belief in God, regardless of kind of what denomination pathway you get there, would necessarily solve the structural policy economic issues. So let's dive into that. What does a divinely aligned economy look like? How does that work? How would we create that, I guess?
Well, I think, like I said, first step scientifically is recognize that humans are subjective. So if they're
Mm.
subjective, you make a decision yourself, Cameron. You
Yeah.
make a decision. How? What's the likelihood that my thought about your decision uh, is valid? I mean, you make your decision because it's best. You consider it to be the best thing for you. I have no right or ability to to uh, say no, no, that's not right. This is right. Okay, so it's basically removing your ability uh, make your to express yourself,
Mm.
and so that's what happens in the economy when someone else is making decisions and interjecting things into the economy rather than the economy just expressing itself. So that's where the divine economy is something that it shows as an expression of human choices rather than choices imposed on humanity. So it's the other way around. It's basically starting from each individual and their uniqueness and their ability to uh, exercise their human qualities. That's what the economy is it looks like from there.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this is a bit of the Adam Smith capitalism problem. Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations gives us kind of the handbook to capitalism. And in a pre industrial, primarily agrarian society, Adam Smith's view of the world and capitalism is actually quite elegant, especially compared to all those guilds and mercantilism that came before. Oh, dude, talk about overregulation. What a disaster. Um, but then industrialization comes along, and all of a sudden you need concentrations of capital to buy machines and build factories and all this type of thing. And the worker is divorced from, their labor to a certain degree. There's alienation. And then there's all kind of the labor value problem. And so, rather than a town's full of people selling their goods and services to their friends and neighbors and all this type of thing, we now have, companies and buildings and products and quarterly earnings. Fast forward 200 years, and you have, modern credit financialized, industrial capitalism pretty much the world over. There's very few parts of this planet not touched by that at this point. How does that sort of pure human expression function in industrialized society? Because otherwise we're going to end up with Fords that, every car is incredibly unique. A tourist can come out looking all sorts of way depending on how the factory workers felt when they built it. You've got a red bumper and a green door. I joke a lot. I joke. I'm sorry. We're this supposed to be a
No, I
serious
think
economic
the,
conversation.
the, the key to all of it is the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And the entrepreneur, what they're doing is making sure that what people want is what is being produced.
Right.
So uh, there won't be things produced that people don't want. That's what the entrepreneurs will do,
Right.
and so I think that's again the what happens is that the structure gets connected to the state, and
Mm.
then it takes on different forms and shapes than it would under a natural condition. Natural conditions is the entrepreneur would you know direct the resources in the where the people's wishes are,
Yeah.
and the entrepreneur is connected to the capitalists, or is it capitalists themselves? They're finding the resources, financial resources, or whatever other resources they need to produce what people want. So they're basically listening to what people want. And so that's how the economy unfolds, based on they're the ones who are driving the economy in the direction that people want it to go, rather than it being pushed in a certain direction. It's like what's called what I would call forced development. The political system, they find a pet project or whatever, and then they push all the resources in that direction. So, a town, it might have been a small town, and then they decide, well, we want a factory here, and then we need these roads, we need this airport. All this stuff follows in, based on this something imposed from above. That's not, it didn't develop naturally, organically. It was pushed into it. It's forced development, and it seems like, oh, that's good. They'll look at all these jobs or whatever, but that's not, it wouldn't necessarily have happened that way, or happened at all, based on the entrepreneur in that society or in that area, what they would have perceived as what people wanted, and then put resources in that direction. So,
Yeah,
societies will, when they are operating in this manner, they'll develop uh, organically, rather than through a top-down kind of um, method.
yeah. Well, and I mean, I think in the history of this country, I mean, in the 19th century, we tended to kind of let that happen. We kind of just kind of let everything go nuts, sort of thing. Um, but then also some of our greatest public works that power the economy were to some degree forced development.
Right.
Transcontinental Railroad, the interstate system,
Right.
um, you know, sort of thing.
Right.
Any airport not near a major city that's a commercial hub, sort of thing. I mean, there's all these different things that have wonderful, other, benefits, and even public, service benefits. You can get an air ambulance and all this sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, there's all these kind of different things that happen and apply, which kind of also gets me into how does one develop and build a society, especially when there are things that are very good for human thriving, but don't necessarily turn a profit.
Well,
What place does that have in the system?
profit is not just dollars and cents. Profit is, the there's psychic profit that that uh, is recognized. So, um, a person could, I mean, if so, I'm thinking in terms of societies developing in ways that are organic and natural. So
Yeah.
so in a society that, so, like, for instance, in the divine economy theory, there's 11 macro there's 11 policies, and one of them is secession. Okay,
Mm.
so and what that basically means is, they're not they have the right to not accept something being imposed on them. Okay, so if a society that has that right, and basically is using that right uh, to allow themselves their own expression of the values and the goals, uh, that are shared by the people in that, whatever that society is. I don't know how what we could say is a village, maybe.
Right.
Okay, so that,
Smallville, USA.
yeah, yeah, but it could be larger. Whatever the I don't know, you could use the word demographic, but whatever the group of individuals and group of uh, it could, let's say, instead of a village, it could be a state, maybe a province, something like
Right.
that. So, but they've agreed. I mean, they have this cultural uh, understanding and foundation that they value. They want to preserve it. They want to make it modernize it in the sense of uh, grow in qualities, in virtues. So, say if it's a state that values natural beauty, okay, then it would want to uh, make sure that that is that's the one of the uh,
A central tenet of their life there.
central tenet. Yeah. So then they would the entrepreneurship that would be taking place in that province would be recognizing that's what people want, and then they would work in that direction uh, by maybe I mean, so again, there's psychic profit in addition to just monetary profit. So the people will benefit and feel uh, prosperous from efforts that are being made in that province that for enhancing the natural beauty of their surroundings.
Yeah, I when you talk about the psychic prophet aspect, I feel like in many times in human history and society, um, that has been a higher or lower priority in different ways. The Medici's got a lot of money in banking, and they started to, complete some religious projects that had fallen on hard financial times in Venice. Sort of thing, and it was a proud moment for them, but obviously served the sort of religious utility for the church and all this sort of thing. And that was obviously, that one can describe, a better place to worship as being that sort of psychic prophet. Fast forward to today in the 19th century, you had a lot of robber barons who delighted themselves on building, theaters and museums and donating to colleges and universities and all this sort of thing. And But today in the 21st century, we have an absurdly high concentration of wealth in very few hands. And no one's building any of that stuff anymore. We're not minting new institutions. We're not founding new stuff. No one's building theater. You don't see, the names of today's wealthy plastered on new museums and new university buildings and all this type of thing. They seem to have gone in a very, very different way in doing that. Do you think that has made our society worse? Is it emblematic of too much government spending? What is with that?
What did you say about government spending?
Too much. It's emblematic of too much government spending.
Oh, well, definitely emblematic of that because that's definitely the condition we're in. There's no doubt that the world is becoming more materialistic.
Hmm.
Okay, and the solution to that is not to get more materialistic. It's to examine what that is, what's going on, and what alternatives are there. And I think uh, again this disconnection with the potential of the economy as a divine institution. See, that's what I think most people have not even the slightest clue about that it's a divine institution, that it was created. So I think a lot of people have heard for sure, and maybe and possibly most of them also believe that humans were created in the image of God. That they've heard that they kind of understand what that means, but they don't really know that part of that unique human gift was what makes them social beings, and that is the economy. That institute that there's just like being created in the image of God is a divine institution in a sense. At the same time, because humans are social, it the, the divine institution of the economy is part of that same creation, same event, or same. They're not separable. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I was saying. When there's not a trust in God, then humans think they have to do something to make to bring about peace and prosperity, that they're necessary for that. I mean that they're necessary agents of change, where really they're really participants, and they're uh, servants of each other, and that's what, just by acting, just by uh, uh, expressing the divine essence that you were given as a unique human being, and cooperating with others, that the economy functions and brings about peace and prosperity. It doesn't need this other layer of elites who think they know better than you do about what you want and what everybody else wants. And basically, here's what it is. It's so again, if you're following me about this idea that the divine economy is a divine institution, economic interventionism, which is what's been happening for centuries, and it's getting more intense. Anyways, what that is that's corruption. That's corruption of a divine institution. So you can't fix it by trying a different type of, I mean, a different degree of corruption. The only way to fix it is to get rid of the corruption and allow it to work. And see, people. So the idea, so I think it's, the idea of trust in God is really uh, the basis of the divine economy, because I think most people have examples of when they were in dire straits, or they knew somebody was in dire straits, and a blessing came to them. Okay, and you think, oh, well, that's nice, but that's just one little piece of evidence of what the potential is for the entire economy of the world.
Hmm.
It's designed to do that, to bring about peace and prosperity through our voluntary social cooperation as divine beings, spiritual beings.
Hmm. Well, that's a very interesting concept. It reminds me of a lot of alternative communities that I've heard about and all that sort of thing, kind of bring a new and different view. So I told everyone this would be fascinating. I said, we're going to go on a little journey tonight. We're just going to completely off and find out this whole thing over here. And it has been absolutely fascinating. I don't want to keep you because we're at the hour, and I said
Okay.
it'd be about a half hour, and we're about 10 minutes past. So, which
Okay.
is actually about the length of a normal Cameron Journal podcast interview. We do about 45 minutes. So, let's close with this. Why don't you let us know where we can find you online and read more about what you do?
Okay. Well, divineeconomytheory.com is
Hmm,
my website. And then if you
wonderful.
go, you see my name up there. If you look under Amazon, and look up that name, you'll see all the books that I've written on the divine economy theory. Bruce
What?
Koerber.
Yes, no, that's wonderful, excellent. All right, well, thank you, Bruce, for coming on the Cameron Journal Newshour. We'll probably have to talk again in the future. And before you go and disconnect, let me let everyone know. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the Cameron Journal Newshour tonight. This is the first time we've ever had a guest on the Newshour. I interview people all the time. We do 2 interviews a week, all this, but we never really had this one on the Newshour. But we're so glad that Bruce was able to stop by. So thank you, everyone, for coming to the Cameron Journal Newshour tonight. We'll maybe have to do this again sometime in the future, sort of thing, having guests on the Newshour. So thank you all so much for coming this evening. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Newshour. For all my social links, you can look up my name or head over to CameronJournal.com. It's at Cameron Cowan on Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn, and at Cameron Journal on TikTok. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you next week. Have a good night.